Long before the United States was born, before the Constitution was signed, before the idea of freedom echoed across the world, there lived a man who would help forge a nation from rebellion and vision. His name was George Washington. But this isn't just the story of a general or a president, it's the story of a man who walked away from power, who fought for a dream bigger than himself, and who changed the course of history forever. George Washington was born in 1732 in Westmoreland County, Virginia. His family was neither poor nor powerful. His father owned land, but wealth and privilege didn't last long. When George was just 11 years old, his father died, leaving him with limited inheritance and few opportunities. Unlike many of the elites of his time, George never received a college education. His youth was shaped not in lecture halls, but in forests, rivers, and uncharted wilderness. As a teenager, George became a land surveyor, exploring the wild frontier of Virginia. At just 16, he was measuring miles of rugged, dangerous land, often alone, facing unpredictable weather, wild animals, and the ever-present threat of conflict. The wilderness taught him discipline, resilience, and self-reliance, lessons he would carry for life, but destiny called him elsewhere. By 21, George Washington entered the military during a time when the British and the French were fighting for control of North America. In 1754, he was sent on a mission that would spark the French and Indian War, a brutal conflict that would teach him the chaos and cruelty of war. His first command ended in surrender. He built a poorly located fort and was overwhelmed by the enemy. It was a bitter defeat. But failure didn't break him, it forged him. Over time, he earned respect as a brave, steady, and relentless leader. Even when facing overwhelming odds, Washington stood firm. He learned when to fight, when to retreat, and most importantly, how to lead men who trusted him with their lives. Years passed, empires rose and crumbled. The British crown grew more oppressive, taxes increased, freedom shrank. The American colonies, 13 separate regions with different interests, slowly began to unite under a single idea: independence. And when revolution seemed inevitable, when talk turned to action, there was only one man the people trusted to lead them into war: George Washington. In 1775, the Second Continental Congress named him Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, but what they gave him was not truly an army. It was a scattered collection of farmers, blacksmiths, and merchants with muskets. No uniforms, no training, no pay. Washington didn't flinch. He rode to Cambridge, Massachusetts, took command, and began building a force that could stand against the greatest military empire in the world. The Revolutionary War was brutal. Washington faced defeat after defeat. In New York, he was outmaneuvered. In New Jersey, outnumbered. Supplies were scarce, morale was low. Some wanted him replaced, but Washington held the line. In the winter of 1776, with enlistments expiring and hope nearly lost, he made a desperate move. On Christmas night, he led his men across the icy Delaware River and launched a surprise attack in Trenton. The victory was small in scale but massive in spirit. It proved to the world, and to his soldiers, that the American cause was not yet lost. For 8 long years, Washington fought not just the British but hunger, disease, mutiny, and betrayal. He lost more battles than he won, but he won the war that mattered. In 1781, with the help of the French, Washington cornered British General Cornwallis in Yorktown. Surrounded and outgunned, the British surrendered. The war was over. The colonies had won. But perhaps Washington's greatest act was what he did next. He resigned. He didn't seize power. He didn't crown himself king. He walked away from the military, returned to his farm, and shocked the world. In an age of tyrants and monarchs, here was a man who could have ruled with absolute authority, choosing instead to become a citizen. But America still needed him. In 1787, the fragile new country was falling apart. The Articles of Confederation were weak, the states were divided, and chaos loomed. Washington was called back, this time not as a general, but as a unifier. He presided over the Constitutional Convention, guiding the creation of a new government based on law, liberty, and balance. 2 years later, in 1789, George Washington was unanimously elected the first president of the United States. He didn't want the job. He had no hunger for politics, no desire for fame. But he answered the call once again. As president, Washington set the standard for every leader who would follow. He refused to serve more than 2 terms, fearing the rise of lifelong rulers. He established the cabinet system, promoted neutrality in foreign wars, and warned against the dangers of political parties. His leadership was steady, deliberate, and humble. When his presidency ended in 1797, he again walked away, peacefully, voluntarily. Twice, the most powerful man in the country chose to step down rather than hold on. George Washington died on December 14, 1799, at Mount Vernon, his beloved home. He was 67 years old. News of his death swept the nation. In Europe, Napoleon ordered 10 days of mourning. In America, bells tolled in every town. A new republic had lost its father. But Washington had already given America everything she needed. He gave her independence. He gave her unity. He gave her the example of a leader who puts the people above power. Even in death, his legend grew. He became more than a man. He became a symbol of duty, of sacrifice, of the quiet strength that builds nations. He wasn't perfect. He owned slaves, a fact history must not forget. But in his final years, he did something remarkable. He freed them. Unlike most of his peers, Washington freed every enslaved person in his will, a decision that would echo for generations. George Washington didn't just fight for freedom. He grew into it, and through him, so did a nation. America today stands not just on laws and land, but on the shoulders of a man who believed in something larger than himself. He could have been king, but he chose to be a citizen. He could have ruled for life, but he chose to walk away, and in doing so, he gave birth to a new kind of power, the power of the people. This is the story of the man who founded the United States of America, not with words alone, but with courage, integrity, and the unwavering belief that liberty was worth everything. His name was George Washington, and without him, there would be no America.